Oh, thank you so much, Matt. Yes, my name is Kyle Kepner. I am the president CEO of GDM Solutions Incorporated here, and we're pretty excited about doing this presentation about the ATD. This is a product that we received quite a few questions about, inquiries about, and we just wanted to have a webinar to maybe provide a little bit more insight as to, what it is, how is it used in an organization, which organizations would benefit from it, what users would benefit from it. So you'll notice throughout this presentation that we're not really trying to sell the product per se. We're probably more or less trying to unsell the product. This is not a, out of the box product where you can just start to utilize it and just fully understand how it works at the organization for whether, where it's stored, the connections and so forth. There has to be somewhat of a commitment, also an understanding. The commitment is also with the IT portion. It's got a lot of benefits, but to implement it is not as easy as it would seem. So today, be mindful of that. Be mindful of who would actually benefit from this product, and really understand the commitment that's involved when this is and if this is deployed throughout the organization that you belong to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with a presentation here. And I just want to verify, Matt, can you verify that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. Okay, so this is just a few slides, maybe 15 slides total. What we're going to do is we're going to do a live demonstration so that way you can actually see the product and how it works live for your organization. And but I want to frame the conversation and have you understand exactly what it is before we do the demonstration, and hopefully then that will build in a lot more understanding as I do the demonstration. The demonstration is actually fairly short when in a really understanding what it is, but how it's deployed throughout the organization, that's actually the more intense part, and really understanding how to use it within that organization. So with that, the ARM trial database, or better known as ATD, is the ability to safely connect, store, and analyze data. And depending upon how you want to connect to this and how you want to store it and how you want to analyze data from it, that is a lot of the question is that hopefully your organization may understand better after today. So with that, see if I can get this to advance. There we go. The ATD provides the ability for an organization to utilize a relational database for storing and retrieving trials. You can store ARM trials along with all of their attachments in an SQL Server database. This database is integrated directly within ARM through an export and import feature within ARM, and you have the ability to do many different options with that data within that SQL database. So as you can see within the PowerPoint presentation here, each trial, the ARM file itself, each trial DAT file can be stored within the ATD. Understanding this within ARM, you also have the ability to store additional information such as PDFs, Word documents, photos, Excel documents, really any type of trial, known trial attachment, you can then store with it. Maybe a Word document could be a CRO contract. It could be a presentation. It could be maybe another set of instructions for that trial coming from that protocol. You can store all of that, and that can be then sent along with the trial and stored in the ARM trial database. Not only can you store it there, you can also retrieve all of that. So when we think of storage, it may not just be that we want a backup. The ATD is a wonderful backup. you have the ability to send all information, conclusions, objectives, everything about that trial. You can send that all to the ATD. And understanding that, now it's backed up. That information can then also be retrieved in two directions. It can be retrieved back to the individual trialist, or it can be retrieved back to another trialist that may be in the same department around the world. But also that information can then be retrieved by other systems that may be deployed within the organization, whether it be the accounting group, whether it could be the product management team, the development team, essentially the groups that actually do production. So knowing that it's a common trial repository for multi-user access, it's also a common repository for the rest of the users within the organization. So the organization can choose to link different types of programs, such as Tableau or ClickView or Access, even Excel if they wanted. They can create those customized multi-trial reports, or more of a metadata analysis type reporting. So this company enterprise software can directly interface with the trial information in the SQL Server database. And that's really what we're selling, is we're selling a pre-made database that automatically connects to ARM. The company can also control the permissions for accessing that trial information. So you may have specific trials that are very proprietary and only a specific group of researchers have the ability to access these. Or maybe it's based upon a region. You can have regional settings for permissions. So you have all of that ability, all because now that data is now in an SQL server, of which the IT group would then manage. Which brings us into our next topic, which is there are SQL Server requirements. And this is one of the hardest parts of deploying the ATD within the organization, is setup and support must be by the company's internal IT. They must obtain an appropriate SQL Server, 2012 or newer. That is not included within the pricing of the ATD. The company licensed SQL Server must be hosted by that company internally or on a cloud. GDM does not house company data, nor do we host the SQL database, nor do we have the ability to even see the information within that database. So what we do within our organization is we help provide that connection and maintain that connection through a maintenance fee. So we originally sell the database, which I'll be able to show you today, but also we provide that connection and help provide the abilities of specific ARM licenses to be able to connect to it. So GDM will provide the scripts to create the database. These will be sent to the company internal IT, and then they would actually build a database. So at no point do we actually go into the database, create a connection to our company. We don't have any of those rights, and we would not want those rights in the future. So then the company IT personnel would make the database accessible to all or to specific ARM clients within the company that would need to connect to the ATD. Of which understanding, based upon the company themselves, they have the ability to connect through many different means, whether through a cloud, whether through, and then having that cloud have an ARM service that will automatically run in the background and provide the connection right into the database. Or if you so choose, which we have not had a client do this currently, but if you would like to have the ability for CROs to send data directly to the ATD, you would have that ability also. So we really, like I had mentioned, it's really a process. This is not something that you can just deploy. This is something that you have the ability to do this but we really need to work directly with the company's IT groups to ensure that there's a plan and there's a commitment and that it's set up. So knowing that the data can reside within an organization, it can reside on people's laptops, it can reside on, in SharePoints, it can reside, regular Dropbox accounts or OneDrive accounts. And then you have the ability to send that just like you would send information through a post office, and you would send that to the ATD. And then that company would have the ability to give permissions for each of the mailboxes. And then individual researchers would have the keys to bring that information back. And then knowing that all that information is now owned and stored in an SQL database, now you can make pretty pictures to make clear decisions about what is actually happening, not just at the researcher level, but maybe at the accounting level, maybe at the director level. We state that ARM is a professional research tool. It's professional research software. So we would never expect, director levels of research or of development. We would never really expect them to be utilizing ARM per se, but we would expect them to be utilizing the information that ARM helps provide through the storage of professional research data. So budget analysis may not be a task that a regular ARM user would be tasked with. A director level may be the person that is analyzing the budgets and dividing up the research development dollars, but they may not be ARM users. So this is one way through this database. It's one way to keep track of budgets. It's one way to keep track of trials that have been, already deployed. And now they're coming back into the ATD, so they need to be paid. And what amount of trials do you have out there? And for how, thinking about cash flow and so forth, you may utilize this to develop a company enterprise software that answers these questions for you, of which, sure, the researcher can provide this information to you. That's awesome. But if all they need to do is click a button and send it to the ATD, and it automatically generates this information for the other organization, other divisions within the organization, then it's better. It's better that way. So moving on, some of the requirements is that ARM requires the most current ARM version and ST version to utilize it. And I haven't even touched on ST yet. ST has the ability to go and find this data and run an analysis. You can manage thousands of trials utilizing an interface similar to the ARM study list. You can directly export to and import from ATD within the ARM interface. And ARM validates trials before exporting, which is a key feature to ensure that whether you're using study rules or you have, specific within ARM, it's got a validation process all of its own, stating that if you have a value, you probably should have a unit within a field, because we don't know what that value really means. So there's some internal validation that you can utilize. And prior to sending those data, those trials to the ATD, it will automatically validate those trials to ensure that really the information going into the ATD does make sense for at least at that point in time. So really there's a button within ARM, and within the trial or outside of the trial, you can send multiple trials to the database. You would export it from ARM into the database. And really, I want to touch on understanding export. You really are not importing it into the database, you're exporting it to the database. And the reason for that is the ARM trial is considered the source of truth. It is where the data should always be correct, whether that is an internal trialist or a CRO. probably one of the most common questions that we receive is, once we have the data in the ATD, do we have the ability to update it and change it? We highly recommend against doing that. We highly recommend that the source of truth is the data within the ARM trial file itself. And that can be stored separate from the ATD. It can reside in a separate location. But thinking about the CRO, the last place or position you ever want to be in is having data that has been manipulated in ATD, having that same trial manipulated at the sponsor level or at the, I'll call the director level, where you've noticed that a CRO or an internal trialist has entered something incorrectly, so you've corrected it quickly on your device, and then have the CRO have a different version or an internal trialist have a different version. It's always best practice to ensure that the data is at the source of truth is the person who is conducting the trial, updates that trial continuously, and then sends that directly to the director or sends that directly to the ATD. And that way the ATD will mirror what is the source of truth. So it's kind of a key aspect and understanding of the ways of working for how and where the data is stored. So please be mindful of that in deploying the ATD. It's not the ability to have this system speak back and forth through a connection. It's really about, okay, we have deployed ARM, we have deployed the trial, we have conducted the trial, we stored it in that ARM trial file. That is where the truth lies. And then that information can be sent to the ATD. So usually the second question is, does ATD store the different versions? The answer is no. The last person to send that trial to the ATD, that is the information that resides in the ATD. So through the use of features within ARM, such as validation lists, study rules, SEs, we need ARM to be the source of truth and the device that provides that consistent data. We do not want to be using the ATD as a tool to fix data to get it consistent. We really want ARM to be that consistent watchdog, essentially, to ensure that the data goes into ATD correctly. So as I mentioned, every time that data goes into the ATD, it's validated. So the more validation that you can have at the ARM level, the better you are for sending that information to the ATD. So you can send export or you can export. Keyword is export it. Keyword is ensuring that you understand that the ARM is the owner. It's exporting it. You can export single trials or multiple trials. ARM will report whether it was successful or not, and if there's any validation errors. And the amount of time to export a trial depends greatly on the connection between the computer and the SQL server. Today, when I export a trial, my database resides directly on the device. So I'm not even moving through an internet connection. But if you can imagine having 400 pictures, high quality pictures attached to an ARM trial, and you export that to an SQL server somewhere around the world, it may take a little bit of time. But if you don't have pictures and it's just data, regular, numbers and so forth, it won't take very long, but then that still depends upon the connection that you have. And we have no way of, really mitigating that connection. We can't make a connection any faster or any slower. So also now you have the ability to import from the ATD. So this is one of the key benefits. As I stated, ATD is not, you would not purchase an ATD just for data storage backup. Now, granted, it'll work that way. Let's say that, you know, my computer, I'm part of an organization. I was in charge of 50 trials, and it would be best practice for me to always send them to the ATD, because if my device were to die, hopefully I've got my backup set, which we always recommend having that external backup. But some organizations don't allow for an external backup. So then maybe my backup is a cloud, such as a Dropbox or OneDrive. But you have to ensure that the connection that I am utilizing to back that up is also instantaneous. So I can send my data to Dropbox. I can have that backup set within ARM. But if my Dropbox isn't set to sync every minute or continuously, maybe within that 10 hours, I may have a, a device failure, and now I don't have that data. So as long as I get into the ways of working where I send it directly to the ATD, now that information will reside at that SQL server, of which would be backed up and would be, you know, professionally stored at the organization. So knowing that, okay, that's a great product of, or a feature of ATD. But the other feature is, now I don't have to, if I want to run an analysis, I want to query information about specific treatments or specific trials, and I want to run an SQ analysis, I would have the ability to use the exact same study list query to bring specific trials back from the ATD from my colleagues around the world. And I don't have to worry about where a specific colleague is storing that data within specific folders in Dropbox. As long as it's company policy or a preferred way of working, and everyone is sending their data to the ATD, I would now have the ability, if I have permissions, to bring that data back down from the ATD and run an analysis. And I can filter just like we would normally with the study list. So that in itself is, I would say, quite a benefit, because of all that time of data management, I would call it, or file management, that can somewhat go away. Now, granted, you're going to want to manage your files on your own device, but now it doesn't have to be a company-wide policy of how do we manage this data. So ST has the ability to directly connect to the ATD also. And depending upon your connection, you may have the ability just to connect directly to ATD and not bring the trials down. We usually recommend to bring the trials down to the device and run ST on the device itself, and it'll just bring a temporary set of data, and you don't have to worry about saving that data or backing it up, because you would already have the analysis from the ST, and you would have it would be coming from ATD, so you wouldn't have to worry about losing that information. So ATD really enhances the use of ST. And I believe that it opens a lot of doors into understanding how products may or may not work throughout the world. And what I've heard, some of the most restrictive areas for registration of products, they are now loosening the data requirements, that now data from around the world may be utilized in that same registration process. And understanding that, how do you utilize that data if you don't know where it is, or even if it exists? So companies are coming together, these large, global companies, they want to tend to work together now to build these study rules, to build these validations in the protocols, so that way they can utilize information from around the world. So ATD enhances the use of ST. You can create criteria to answer the questions, such as, what trials have we worked with for a particular product? What locations or regions have worked in it? And that's the other a key feature that I've noticed with companies is they don't know what products they've actually tested. They don't, they're really struggling to understand that, well, we've already tested this product at this rate with this combination and so forth. With the ATD, it makes it a lot easier to understand which products have already been tested, why, when, what weeds were, or if it's a herbicide, what weeds were present and so forth. Because weeds, with the, I'm losing the word now, but resistance, the ability to look through a database and to determine whether that weed has been tested or not, and if there's been some resistance is absolutely key. So it really helps with companies to budget the amount of money that they want to utilize for specific products. And then you can use ARM to filter fields a lot more easier in creating the criteria. So the database structure is really tables. It's a bunch of tables where the ARM data has been normalized into tables. So ARM itself is set up so that you know where fields are. It's kind of muscle memory. You fill out information, and then when it's sent to the database, it's sent to individual tables, and it's normalized in a way that the data is not duplicated over and over again. Companies create views to tie tables together to answer a question for a company enterprise software such as Tableau or ClickView. So with that, I am going to show a live demonstration of what actually occurs when files are sent to the ATD. So this right here is the database. So it's an SQL Server database. I'm going to connect to mine. This is not needed at the researcher level. Most companies would not allow researchers to actually see this or actually have any access to this per se. They would not go to Microsoft SQL and open it up and start looking in tables. That just would not happen in an organization. This is where the company IT professionals would install this database as the repository. So this is the database that's installed. I called it ATD trial demo. And within that database, there are all of these tables, of which for the ARM user, you would definitely recognize what these are. This is the assessments. This is the assessment data itself. These are the headers. Over here, we've got the general trial description. We have moisture information. We have pest description. We have all of this separated out into individual tables. And this table here is the treatment table along with the trial table. So this is where there needs to be a discussion between the ARM researcher and the company IT professionals, the database managers, because if they're going to build queries within ATD, they may not totally understand where some of the information is, but an ARM researcher would have the ability to say, probably in this area. This is probably the table that you'll find it, and this is how it's tied together. As a company, GDM Solutions, we would also be able to be that group that can answer these questions and help with how that is, how everything is tied together. So just opening up one of these tables, this is a table that I have all of these trials that are stored in this database, and this is just the information about this trial. This is actually the file name where it's stored and so forth. But notice how there's not plot data in here. There's no information about plots, that or data itself. That would all be stored in other tables. So we have, assessments here. So let's look at our assessments. This is a table that has all of the assessments. So this is stating that this is plot 102, data column 1, subsample 1. And this is the actual data itself. But notice we don't have the assessment data headers for every single plot. You can imagine how big these tables would get and how much duplicative data there would be if we did that. So we have the assessment headers in a different table. So here, now for column 1, data column 1, this is actually what this is. There's a pest, a part rated. So you can notice all of the different fields that we have within ARM. These are all of the columns that we have for the data stored. So for those of you that may be IT professionals, if I open up a trial, this is all of the information in the assessment data header. And I should have opened up the trial itself. And maybe I did accidentally get the right one. But this is this information, of which we would not duplicate for every single data point for each of the plots. So this is how, you know, I'm going to just do a split screen here. This is how, when I look at the structure of the tables, they're structured in the way that ARM is somewhat structured. So we've got general trial. Here we have the general trial description table. We have maintenance. We have the maintenance table. We have the comments. We have, you know, the assessment and so forth. So that's how this all works. And we've built this for you, for the organization, so that if I wanted, and I'm going to do this live right now, when I send this data, so if I make a change in here and I send this to the database, so I'm just going to click on this database export button. If you notice on the left here where my mouse is, hopefully you can see my mouse, it's running through the trial itself and it's exporting everything to this database. So you can see it's exporting the plots now, the comments, attachments. And it will export every single piece of information, or maybe not quite every single piece, but most, I would say 99%. And if we need to, we can always export more. I think I realized there was one spot or one data point that we didn't send out, but we can always add that in if needed. So one of the reasons, and I don't know what I just did there, it shows us not responding. We'll see if it's sending out. Let me see if there's a trial window. Oh, it's still going. This one might have had a whole bunch of pictures. We'll have to see. But one of the benefits of this export, there we go, is that it validates it. And then it gives me a response to state that, you know, this is what was sent. It was successful and so forth. So now this information is in there. And to reiterate, it overwrote the information that was previously there for that trial. It does not save a version of it. So I click OK. Let me open this up and see if I had attachments in this one. Yep, so I had some attachments in this trial. You can see that I had a lot of pictures attached. And those are all now stored in the ATD. And I can show those attachments. Oh, let me make this bigger. Oh, I need to. And so you're not going to see the actual attachment itself because it's in SQL terms, it's a little bit different. It's a type, but you can always get them back out as that type of file. So you do have the ability to bring these images into a report for a company enterprise software. So we had created one, just an example one, and work with a company and create a report in Microsoft Access. And we were able to bring that report with the images along with it. So you do have that ability to get all those attachments out. So key point is that maybe you have a summary or you have the results of that trial. You can attach, really anything to this trial itself. And now, as an individual researcher across the world, they may want to bring that trial to their device, and they would have the option to bring in those attachments, or the attachments would come with, and they could then go to the attachments editor and open them up and actually look at them. So this is soybean pictures. So this is where in the presentation, and I'm going to go back to that slide. I'm going to bring this over here and go from current slide, see if it comes across. These are the attachments that I was talking about. They're stored within the trial itself. And then those can come along and go into the ATD. Now, you can query the data with ST, but you cannot query within the attachments. Like if you had data in Word or Excel, you would not be able to query that per se. But ST would then run the analysis on all of the trials that you have available there. So that is how to send data. And actually I can close this out here. I can also send it from the study list. So if I wanted to send numerous, I could then choose if I wanted, okay, I want to export out studies that I have, and I can utilize the study list. So maybe I worked on a project for that day, and maybe I want to send out only the 2021. I can then send out these 3 and send them all to the database. And it'll go through each one of them individually and send that data. And I believe that the others I did not include as many pictures, so hopefully it doesn't take as long for the demonstration. But it will now send every single one of them and give a report as to the status. And if any of them fails validation, which I should have set up a failure, it will not export it, and it'll say export failed. So maybe you have 20 in a day, it might be good to hit the button, go grab a cup of coffee, send those 20 out, or just do them one at a time for each individual trial itself. The benefit is, and so you can see now it ran through a bunch of study rules, and I had some recommended that they were recommended, so I failed in them, but it still exported it to the database. And then here it says export successful for the next one. And it gives you that report as to what actually occurred. So we get this question a lot. A lot of times the database, but people believe that the database should be the validation step. We disagree. We believe that ARM should be the validation step. And then whatever's stored in the ATD should pass validation. So that's why I keep coming back to the source of truth. You don't want to change data in the ATD. You want to ensure that the data is correct in ARM. And I'm also a proponent of sending data, unfinished data, to the ATD, because the company enterprise tools, such as ClickView, can easily filter out trials that are not finalized. My belief is that it's better to have the data in the ATD and an understanding within the organization that the data that you query should be set to final, or some sort of keyword in there to state that it is complete. So this data is stored on my device. Oops, I just accidentally right-clicked. And all of my trials are stored here. So I'm going to attempt to show. Now let's pretend that all of that data in the ATD is on Matt's device. And Matt sent it to the ATD. So I'm going to delete this. Sometimes ARM can be too smart. So if I have that file already here, it's not going to re-download and so forth. It'll be smart enough to know, it already exists, I already have it, so I don't need to see that. I don't need to bring that back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a window here, and I'm going to go to the ARM, and I'm going to do a window here and set that. And I'm going to bring data back from the ATD. So I just clicked on the import from ATD, and maybe I only want 2021. And let's see if I have different crops. I don't know if I did or not. But if I go to my crop code, maybe I only want to see, no, I only got certain crops. So I got, I think this is ZMA, no, this is soybeans. And I only want to bring in certain data back. So I can bring whichever ones that I want back. And I'm going to try, because it automatically set my window. Let me see if I can do this window to the right again. There we go. I'm going to click OK. Now watch what happens when I select this file to store this in, because now I'm telling it, I don't have these trials. I want to bring them back into my computer because it may be a lot easier to run ST analysis on it. Also, I might want to see the attachments. So watch what happens when this comes in. It brought in all of the trial information. And notice how it's going up 92, 103, 105. It brought in all of those trials along with all of the attachments. So that way, when I am in ARM, and it also opens up the last one. So I'm going to go ahead and close the last trial that I brought back. Now, what I'm going to do is I would need to rebuild this list. Granted, in this case, I don't need to because it would already know, but I'm going to just show you, I would want to rebuild my list, and I would want to ensure that I now can see all of those trials, because I'm not going to go back here and go and double click on each one of them, because I don't really care that they reside in this folder. I want to work in ARM. So now I'm rebuilding the list, and I'm going to bring in those 4 trials. And when I open up the trials, the attachment will be known. So now ARM went to that folder, looked in the folder, found 4 studies. Now each of the studies, if I double click on this study and open it up, or this trial and open it up, now I can go to the assessment data. Everything will be there, and every single one of the attachments should also be there. I wonder if I open up the right one. There we go. Every single one of the attachments should be there and connected. So this is a way for a researcher, maybe not in the same division, maybe not in the same region, not at the same research location, could provide information to the other researchers and provide a summary. This is also a way, when you export, for the for the study director to provide the accounting department the CRO contract, because they can send it to the database, and the accounting group can go through, and maybe there's a specific word. You know, if I were to include an Excel document or a Word document, I could put in CRO contract, and then the accounting group could actually pull all of those contracts out and file them and put them up on a payment schedule. And maybe the payment schedule is once it's established. or once it's finalized, however that's determined. So that brings in the demonstration of the other piece. Because, okay, this is great for the researchers to work together. It's an awesome tool to run summaries, maybe on products that you didn't even know were being tested. You don't know the results. You don't, if they were tested, you could look at it and say, oh, but they didn't test it the way I want to. So I'm going to take research budget. I'm going to then test it a different way. But now you can involve others in the organization. And so what is built here is, this is what I would consider a dashboard. I use Click View, and what I did with the help of a very intelligent person, my wife, to be honest, she built this for me, and this connects directly to the database through a script. So this is where I want to start to unsell a little bit, because you have to be committed. If this is what you would like, and you would want Tableau or ClickView or Power BI or whatever, if you want that to connect, that is not what we provide. Now, granted, if you want, we have started to dabble in it a little bit. I do have some names that I could refer, but I can tell you the resources that are committed to this are much higher than the resources committed to purchasing the ATD. And I can tell you the resources committed to building your own database and exporting raw data out of ARM and sending it to your own database, and then having the commitment to do that, are much larger than the price of the ATD. And we'll talk a little bit about how ATD is priced at the end. But the key thing is that this is all ready to go. And the commitment of the organization, I just want to declare and bring to the forefront that this commitment to build this is somewhat expensive depending upon what you want to do. So know for sure what you want to do. And if you're committed to putting resources towards it, whether that's developer hours, internal, or it's hiring an external developer to build this, that's up to you, but it still costs money, right? So key thing is this is truly a value of the ATD, but we do not provide this as part of the fee. Like I said, we're dabbling in it some. We can do certain things. We're learning, because it is one of the key benefits of ATD, and we want to be able to provide that service. But we would never expect a client to do this portion, an ARM researcher. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some that can't and do it a lot better than me, but we wouldn't expect that of a client. So this is connecting directly to the ATD. So this is going directly to the SQL and connecting directly to it. And what happens is that this data is then loaded. And so here's a connection. So this is something that IT has to also manage. I'm giving myself permission to contact this SQL server, and I'm bringing in the data directly from that SQL server into this, what I call a dashboard. So in this dashboard, I can do numerous things. So in this dashboard, I could say Stomper Plus. I want to look at 2021. Oh, let me see if, well, let's see. I think I got to have a product. There we go. And I want to see it versus everything. Or maybe I want to see it versus just these products. Now I can look at the data. I can look at maybe just South Dakota's data. That moves through to other sheets or other analysis, because this is a dashboard. So maybe I want to change, maybe not just Stomper Plus, maybe I want to see Super Stomp. And I can look at that data. And I wish I would have built a piano key chart, because that's very common, excuse me, in the product management side. when you're going to commercialization, because then it kind of tells you success rate and so forth. I had this working, but Google Maps changed it where a product beat or lost throughout the world. You could set that up, and then just regular raw data. But here's a budget side. So if I wanted to clear this out, I could say, well, in 2020, what was my budget for, oops, I just clicked wrong. What's my budget for biostimulants? And who had the budget? Oh, really nobody did. So let's go to 2021 and let's see who has the budget. So I put in a Arkansas research for hire. This is their treatment fee. This is the amount that's at established currently of the trials in there for biostimulant groups. And this is the amount that's at final. So maybe there's a certain amount that we have to pay. And this is their treatment cost. And if I wanted to see just the status of 1 year final and maybe not just biostimulants, now I can see I've got other CROs that I have. So this is a way, and these tools are really neat. So right now, all of this is active. So if I wanted to see just research for hire, I could just click on research for hire and it would automatically set that. So to reiterate, this piece is not part of the ATD. This is the connection to this. And this is the central hub of what ARM sends to it. So you do your research, you document it, you send it to the ATD. You can either run summaries in ARM, or from the ATD, you can send it to another tool to do a dashboard or some sort of other analysis. And this is key to understand because we believe in quality relationships within organizations. I'm not saying we don't want study directors talking with accounting personnel and so forth. We just want it to be positive conversations. We want them to be in the know and so forth. This is the tool to do that. And we would never expect, because as ARM users, it's a professional tool. Some people call it complex. I state it a little bit different. It's a tool, it's a complex tool to handle complex research. We would never request that product management or accounting groups or executives know how to use ARM to find out this information. That's just not an expectation. We expect professional scientists to use our software. And then it doesn't mean that they can't use this too, but this is a means to hopefully satisfy some of the requirements of the organization. So knowing that and coming somewhat to a close, I'm going to go back to this. ATD is an investment. And there's tiered pricing based upon the number of people that are in the organization, the number of people that have rights to send to the ATD. Also, depending upon if you want to do a cloud structure, all of that is bid out essentially. So I'm not going to give a price today because it doesn't really benefit the organization. If after the presentation today, you still have a good understanding of ATD, hopefully, and if you believe that it is something that would benefit your organization, and you've had some internal conversations about, hey, do we have IT on board? Do we have a group to do development? Do we want to do that? Who's going to participate? Then contact us and we can start having some discussions. And there's going to be specific questions that we're going to ask. And some of those questions is, what are your goals? Who is your team? What system do you currently have in place? And what do you need to set up prior? So it's really more of a conversation. It's just, as I stated earlier, it's not just out of the box. We can't just send it to you. we have to build it per se. There's pieces that we have to build within it so that it resides on that server, and that this ARM license knows that server, it knows the connection, it has the permissions and so forth. All of that has to be set up prior to really make this system work. And we have some companies that are really making this work extremely well, but they were committed. So I'm going to open it up. I realize we don't have a lot of time here, but Matt, was there anything that I missed?
Been a few questions I've tried to reply to by text. I would say in general, if you could clarify the file flow. I think there's some confusion whether ATD is really the way you save trials, that you're constantly working actually on the database when you save the trials, as opposed to more of the repository.
Yeah, so just to clarify, this trial always resides on my device. That's where it should be. It's going to be there. If I'm the trialist and I'm the owner, I should have this file on my device. If I'm sending, and so let's say I'm the Arkansas Research Hire for Hire or whatever. Hopefully that's not a real company name. I just made that up. So hopefully it isn't really here. I don't think I know that name, and I'm a CRO. I should be the one that always makes the changes. And that file should be saved. And I should really store that somewhere. When I send that to my sponsor and I do the file send to, because that's the correct way to do this, because then it goes through validation, then that file that goes to the sponsor, that sponsor would open it up, review it. If there's any changes, request that the CRO makes the changes and resends it. And at that time, they can choose, they can send it to the database. They can send it with it not complete unless it fails validation. And then when they receive it again, they can send it again. You can send this file over and over and over again to the database. The reason you would import it, there's really two main reasons that you would ever import the trial back to your device, is if you lost it. If your device died and it was your backup, hopefully that never has to happen, but that would be one reason. And the other reason is it's not my trial, but I want to run an analysis or I want to review it. I want to look at it. That'd be the only time that I would bring it back. I would want to run summaries from summary cross trials, or, and maybe it becomes that, okay, I immediately go to the attachments and look, oh, SureKill, okay, versus SureKill 4, so forth. That's what I want to do. So this database is not what I consider live. It's a repository and data is dumped in and accessed from, but it is not live. You do not have to have, you would not be connected to the internet to only use it, as in every time you open up ARM, oh, now I got to be connected because I'm going to get this trial and I got to work on it and then send it back. That's not how this works. Any other part need clarification or any type of demonstration? Matt, did I miss anything else?
I don't think so. I think you really covered everything else. And certainly we've reached our hour. I think we can hang on the line for a few minutes if there are questions, but do like to extend a thank you for those who joined us. If you do have to run, for your time, and definitely reach out to us if you have questions, want to set up a meeting with Kyle and our team to discuss this more. As we said, it's not an out of the box, here you go, here's the software, go for it. It's much more of a discussion with you and your company and talking about your needs and how this can work for you. So,
and just a couple topics. The size, we get a lot of questions about the size. It just depends on how many photos and how many data points you have. So we usually get the question of what do you recommend for a size of database? We really don't know. So we recommend just starting off with, you can always upgrade for that size. Now that upgrade is not through us. That's the purchase of the SQL database, like the SQL Server itself. The SQL Server is so well known. It is so easy to work with. It's a very good, proper way of storing data. And what I'm showing you here is what a lot of the IT groups ask us is, okay, so what's the oh shoot, I'm not lost the term.
Schema.
Schema, there we go. What's the schema? It just depends on the question that you're trying to answer. So the schema is tables. And yeah, there are certain tables that are somewhat linked by plot number and so forth, but it's really understanding what's in each table and what question you want to answer. So this is an example of how I said the data is so normalized in order to answer a certain question. Oh, I must have something off in that view. I'm running a query here. I'm tying all these tables together to make data make sense so that it can go into this format. That can be us for certain, if you want to entertain that option, we would start off slow, but it's really, this is what that commitment on the other side is. That's a developer, and it can be internal, it can be external. That's up to you. So this is just what we call a view or a query, and it'll provide information for you. So I greatly appreciate the ability to get in front of everyone today. I thank you so much for your attendance. This is a topic I have been presenting on this to clients, I think once a week for like 30 some weeks now. So it is at some point every week I am presenting, answering questions, it's continually evolving. I think the industry has moved into a new stage, I would say. And the other piece of this, which I totally forgot to mention, is that if you're a sponsored company, there's a good chance that if you want to license out a product, they're going to want it in this format. They're going to want it in this type of SQL format. They're going to want the ARM trial files maybe, and they may dump them into their own ATD and run their own analysis or take a look at the data to, prove product worth and product value. But it's really about how can you provide that package? And that package is key to ensure that it has been validated, because companies don't want unvalidated data. They don't want to find mistakes in the data. So that's where it comes back to ARM. And if you guys ever have a need for us to teach about SEs, study rules, validation, how to review data, please let us know. We are here. We have tutorial videos. We have the LMS system. We have, I would hope as many different resources as we can to help with that. So with that, I'm available for a while. If anybody has any comments, they want to raise their hand and speak, or they want to, it's up to you. I'm available. Hearing nothing, please contact us directly, through the support if you have any questions, or, we've got a form online that you can fill out stating that you want more information about ATD. We can set up another live demo with you and answer any questions that we can. And Margaret Kappenman is our VP and Chief Development Officer. She would be the one that helps with the connections, and then we would provide an offer and move forward. And just so you know, the pricing of ARM or ATD, it's you can always make it bigger. Your company can grow, and then we give credit for what's already paid, and you don't have to buy a whole new one again or anything. It's all set up in a pretty fair way. So, well, Matt, do you want to close it? I don't know how you usually
Yep.
close these
Yep.
webinars. So I
I'll,
I can't thank you guys enough for your business, your time today. We really love this industry, getting to know a lot of people in it in the last 5 years, and it's just been a wonderful experience. So thank you so much for the business and being candid with us and offering up ideas.
Thanks, everybody.